We already have 8 different videos of you raping at least 8 different victims.
He's a serial rapist, convicted in London of raping 10 women in at least 2 countries. But now, as we learn grisly new details about who UK police call one of the most prolific rapists in its history, more women are coming forward with their own gruesome stories. We're taking a look at the latest allegations and what was revealed in a UK courtroom during trial just last month. Welcome to Sidebar, presented by Law&Crime. I'm Jesse Weber. Let's talk about it. 28-year-old Chinese PhD student Zhenhao Zou was recently convicted of drugging and raping 10 women in the United Kingdom and China. But London Metropolitan Police say they collected a huge amount of evidence in this case, and it's likely Zou raped dozens more women while he was studying for his PhD in engineering. Really disturbing case. A jury convicted Zou on 11 counts of rape against 10 women last month, and the details that were revealed during his trial, horrific. According to investigators at the Met, Zou lured women he met on dating apps to his apartment where he drugged them, filmed himself sexually assaulting them. He even kept souvenirs from each victim, which police released a photo of. Things like hair ties, a sock, jewelry. Photos also show a black dress that police think could belong to a victim. And police say all the women that Zou targeted were of Asian descent. Many were Chinese nationals studying in the UK. In 2023, one of Zou's victims posted about her experience on social media, warning others in London's Chinese community about him. Another woman who saw the post realized she had a similar encounter with Zou, and she went to the authorities. In early 2024, Metropolitan Police arrested him.
Hello, you Mr. Zou by any chance?
Go ahead.
What's your name, sir? Zhenhao. Pardon? Zhenhao.
And your surname?
Yes, come on.
Huh?
And your surname?
Family name, Zou.
Pardon?
Zou.
Have you got any ID on you at all?
Yeah.
Yeah, can you show me your ID please, just so we can confirm who you are? That doesn't. Is there anybody else in?
I thought it was done.
Sorry? Say that again?
I remember months.
Okay, sir, I'm arresting you on suspicion of rape, okay? Because it is alleged that on the 14th of November last year, you have vaginally raped a female at this address, okay? You do not have to say anything, but it may harm your defence if you do not mention when questioned something which you later rely on in court. Anything you do say may be given in evidence. Your arrest is necessary for a prompt and effective investigation, okay? Your time of, let me finish, your time of arrest is now 1:53. Come on, come out so I can check the
just allow something cover here.
Can I?
Want a jacket or anything?
Yeah.
Yeah, we'll get that. If you shuffle out. Yeah, can you?
I'm going to search your search feed so we don't have anything sharp on you. Do you understand what's happening?
And when police searched Zou's apartment, they found multiple hidden cameras and SD cards. And eventually, they located a horrifying collection of at least 68 rape videos. Some of the graphic footage was shown to the jury at trial. The videos show Zou raping semi-conscious and unconscious women. The BBC reports that the jurors were visibly upset that they were given regular breaks as these videos were shown. Sky News reports that on one of the videos, a woman can be heard saying, "I really don't do this." Zou apparently responded, "Don't push me, it's pointless. It's not the first time we've done it. This is the second time. The sound insulation here is very good." Wow. Now, 2 of the videos were of the same woman who has never been identified, and 2 others were of women who police were able to locate, and they testified at the trial. The other 7 rapes happened during the pandemic when Zou was living in China. None of those women have been ID'd. But investigators also found drugs in Zou's apartment, including ecstasy and a chemical compound that converts to GHB, or the date rape drug, once inside the body. Now, investigators questioned Zou after his arrest with the help of a Chinese language interpreter.
We already have 8 different videos of you raping at least 8 different victims.
我们看到的内容呢，已经至少有8条录像片，录像显示你是对这些女孩子强奸的。
This includes the two from your phone that we discussed with you upon your last arrest.
就其中包括8条里面，其中包括2条我们上一次跟你说过的那个强奸女孩子的录像。
As Dave said, some of the things seized include 2 hard drives of over 2 terabytes each.
你还有什么2个 hard drive， 好像这些电子器械都在我们那里。
How many videos do you have?
你总共有多少条片呢拍的？
No comments.
How many victims are there?
有多少个受害人？
No comments.
The BBC reports that the Crown Prosecution Service was able to bring charges against Zou for crimes that happened in China because foreign nationals living in the UK can be charged with an offense committed abroad if it's also illegal in that country. Okay, so what I'm about to say is totally off topic. I'm giving you a fair warning right now. But look, there is an issue that affects a lot of people out there, and I didn't even really think about it until we partnered up with our new sponsor, Dermazine. So I'm talking about dandruff. Most people assume it's from a dry scalp, but it's actually caused by an overgrowth of fungus called malassezia. And that fungus, it feeds on the oils inside most shampoos, even some of the ones from dermatologists. But that is where our amazing sponsor, Dermazine, comes in. So Dermazine's clinically tested overnight serum has a 92% success rate and nearly 3,000 positive testimonies. While you sleep, it disrupts the biofilm around the fungus, which most dandruff shampoos never touch, so you can target flakes at the source. And right now, you can get their scalp relief system for an extra 10% off plus free shipping. And that includes the overnight serum, dermatologist recommended shampoo, a scalp scrubber to clear buildup, boost circulation, experience flake-free confidence every day. Go to dermazine.com/sidebar for an extra 10% off and free shipping, or tap the link below to get yours today. Between 2017 and 2019, Zou studied for his undergraduate degree at Queen's University in Belfast, Northern Ireland. He then moved to London to study at University College London, going back to China during the pandemic, and then returned to London. And one of Zou's victims who testified against him spoke with the BBC, not revealing her real name. She's living in China, didn't want to fly to the UK for the trial because her parents don't know what happened to her. They would ask questions. So the Met sent 2 officers to China to be with her, give her support while she gave evidence via video. Another victim also spoke with the BBC, describing the horrifying moments when she realized what was happening to her and that it was being recorded. And she says when she tried to get up and leave Zou's bedroom, he, quote, yanked her back from the doorway and she had to cling onto the door frame with both hands. When she threatened to scream for help, she told the BBC Zou let her go, tried to downplay the whole situation, telling her not to make a big deal about what happened. And she says he even contacted her the next day with no mention of what happened the night before and invited her to go to dinner. She told the BBC she ignored him. Now, in its announcement about the conviction, the Met encouraged any other potential victims to come forward, and they did. The department says at least 23 women have contacted detectives saying Zou may have targeted them. Scotland Yard told reporters that some of the victims are in the UK, others are in China. But the plea for other victims to contact has stretched to Ireland as well. So far, detectives say no Irish victims have come forward, but they're not ruling it out because Zou lived there for 2 years. Now, Zou testified in his own defense, telling the court that he enjoyed role-playing and had discussed rape role-play with at least one of the women in the videos. According to the Crown Prosecution Service, Zou was also found guilty of 3 counts of voyeurism, 10 counts of possession of an extreme pornographic image, 1 count of false imprisonment, 3 counts of possession of a drug with intent to commit a sexual offense. But Zou wasn't convicted of all the charges he faced. He was cleared of 2 further counts of possession of an extreme pornographic image and 5 counts of possession of controlled drugs to commit a sexual offense. Those charges were in connection with other drugs allegedly found in his apartment, like ketamine and MDMA. But in a statement, Metropolitan Police Commander Kevin Southworth said, Zhenhao Zou is a dangerous and prolific sexual predator who manipulated and drugged women in order to prey on them in the most cowardly way. We are determined to support all victim survivors and are now asking women who believe they may have concerns about Zou to please come forward. So it's possible that Zou could face more charges in the future and even a second trial. He's set to be scheduled in June, and the judge warned him that he could face a lengthy prison sentence. That's a quote. To talk more about this, I want to bring on Nick Brett, criminal litigation barrister in the UK. Thank you so much for coming on. Is this a big deal out there? Are people talking about this case?
Yeah, it's a major case. It's an extraordinary case, and actually the most extraordinary thing about it is it really came about as a result of the bravery of one of the victims, who did go to the police and made an allegation that she'd been raped by Zoe, and they then went to his flat and found this, treasure trove of evidence, if you like, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of hours of video footage, and they were therefore able to piece a case from that evidence, when it was really the original complaint was made by just one woman. And in fact, there are numerous victims in the footage that was seized from his home address who've still not been identified to this day.
What is the sentence that he could potentially face?
Well, he's due to appear in a London Crown Court, I think, on the 25th of June for sentence. The maximum sentence for rape is life imprisonment, and he probably runs the risk of the imposition of a life sentence, given the nature of the crimes and the number of the victims. There was a case called Reynard Sinaga, relatively recently, in the last 3 or 4 years, who was somebody, in fact, in quite similar circumstances, was convicted of raping a number of young men who'd also been drugged, and he was given life sentences and tariffs of 30 and 40 years, I think. So the potential sentence for Zou is certainly a very high one.
I didn't see much of it. I mean, look, I wasn't in that courtroom. I know cameras weren't allowed in the UK courtrooms, but I couldn't understand what the defense really was, and him taking the stand and I guess suggesting this was all role playing, everything was consensual. Is that what you got? And I guess him taking the stand didn't really help his case.
Well, that's right. I mean, well, funnily enough, I think detectives felt that he came across as, an educated, and I think one of them described him as being quite a charming man, and that he certainly appeared when he was giving evidence in court. He was very well dressed, he wore glasses, he was of a very sort of serious disposition when he was giving evidence. But yes, his defence was that all of these women were consenting. The difficulty was that I think for him that, quite apart from all the video footage, and some of which you described earlier on, there was also the drugs that were found in his premises, and there is a presumption, and clearly a lot of the victims had been drugged and were unconscious when he was filmed having sex with them, and there is a presumption in the Sexual Offences Act that somebody who has been administered with a drug is not consenting, and in those circumstances the burden of proof switches to the defendant to show that there was consent. And so obviously, given the number of victims, given the nature of the evidence, it was a very difficult case for him.
Now, he wasn't convicted across the board, and in the practical reality, it's not going to have much significance for him because he was convicted of the most serious charges. I am always of the opinion when a jury does that, it shows they didn't just put a blanket guilty across the board, we sweep all the evidence together. It shows they were very careful and deliberate about what each charge was, what the elements of them are, and that signifies to me when I see that kind of split verdict there. But do you think, based on anything you've seen in the case, does it make sense that maybe he was found not guilty of those specific charges regarding possession and drugs and things of that nature?
I think you're quite right, Jesse. In my experience, juries do a proper job. They pay proper attention to the evidence, they pay proper attention to the burden of proof and the standard of proof, and they discharge their responsibilities properly. And obviously they felt, in respect of certain of the charges in this case, that the prosecution hadn't discharged the high standard of proof that we have, which is that crimes must be proven beyond a reasonable doubt.
I think about this a lot in these cases. I think about this a lot in cases involving children. But I also think about it because we have the Diddy trial coming up. What this jury had to see here, these videos, it's one of the reasons why I always wonder, do prosecutors will try to work out a deal so they don't have to present a jury with this evidence. They don't have to show this for a courtroom to see, for innocent people to see. I imagine how difficult this was for them. To have to go through and watch these videos, because it's evidence. They have no choice but to watch it, but it's difficult, right?
I agree, and the difficulty is in a case like this, you know, in lots of allegations of rape, there's no evidence at all. It tends to be a complainant making a complaint. The suspect in that investigation will put forward a defence, usually one that was that the you know, the sexual contact or intercourse was consensual. But so it's quite unusual, I think, that detectives have video evidence, and certainly the quantity of evidence that one had in this case in order to present their case. And obviously, if he's running a defence and he's challenging the case as he was, then the prosecution are unfortunately going to have to put forward their best evidence, and that means that, as you say, that jurors, you know, have to watch some pretty horrific footage. And when one reads, I mean, I wasn't in court either, but when one reads the press coverage of the trial, it seems that at times jurors were visibly upset that they were given breaks quite routinely after the more disturbing evidence. And I have no doubt that at the conclusion of the case, they'll be invited back for the sentence, that they'll be discharged from having to have any responsibility to sit on a jury at any time in the future.
And you also have to think about the victims in this case, having to testify, whether in person or through video. What is the impact of that as a form of evidence in these cases?
Yeah, well, I mean, again, I mean, we have special measures in England where you know, all possible steps are taken to protect the victims of crime when giving evidence, and so that they are entitled to give evidence, sometimes via a live link from outside the courtroom, sometimes from behind screens. But that can't in any way possibly detract from the horror that they must have to suffer in order to relive, you know, these experiences. It seems many of them may not even recollect at all, and would possibly had to be shown video footage of them being assaulted and raped when they had no recollection of it because they'd been drugged. And as I say, it was only because of the bravery of one woman that the scale of the offending in this case was detected. It's extraordinary.
Because look how long he was able to do this. How is that possible? Is it just because this is a particular crime that, I mean, he had video proof, but how would have anyone seen it, right? But is it one of those crimes where it can go undetected unless someone speaks up?
I mean, you know, there are quite a lot of instances of this kind of thing. People engaged in serial offending of this nature, which doesn't get detected for years. And I think, as you said earlier on, he was in Belfast, wasn't he? I think between 2017 and 2019 before moving over to London. And then he went back to China during COVID, during the pandemic, where he obviously offended, and then came back to London. And I guess you're dealing with someone who outwardly presents as a normal person. He was studying, I think, mechanical engineering at a top London university, smartly dressed. I think his parents are wealthy. He's from a good family and background. And I mean, you said earlier on that he even had the temerity to text one of his victims after he'd raped her the following day and ask her out for dinner. I mean, I guess that's the reason why, and obviously the use of the drugs and the difficulty in recollection. I think most of his victims, if not all of his victims, were of Chinese heritage. Perhaps they felt or do feel culturally that they're less able to access help. Maybe they feel that they won't be believed if they go to the police, and so I think in lots of victims of sexual crimes generally feel that. So I suspect that's the reason. But you know, certainly it's horrific that he was able to offend in this way for as long as he did.
No, I think that's a very fair assessment of what may be happening in a lot of cases, but also in this particular case. You talk about that international factor. I thought it was really interesting. The idea, and as I mentioned this before, where the Crown Prosecution Service can bring charges against him for crimes that happen in China. Talk to us about that.
Well, it is interesting that for certain sexual offences, there is provision in the Sexual Offences Act for crimes committed abroad by those who are either nationals of the UK or resident in the UK, and to be tried over here for those crimes. And really, we, I think, have experienced over the last 20 years or so this whole concept of sex tourism, where dangerous offenders would go usually to the Far East and carry out horrific sex crimes and then come back to the United Kingdom. And I think that the ability of prosecutors in the United Kingdom to use I suppose the greater resources that we have over here and the greater techniques that we have over here in order to prosecute for those offences, and also the in-depth knowledge of the offenders themselves, meant that legislative change was made, and that those that commit sexual offences, serious sexual offences outside the jurisdiction can be tried here in the United Kingdom, provided that certain conditions are met, which would in this case, well, have in this case been met. I think there are further victims that are likely to come forward.
And talk about coming forward. Do you believe there's going to be further charges against him? We talked about what might have happened in Ireland. We talk about more women coming forward. Do you suspect that this is just one chapter, that he's going to be hit with additional charges, that there will be a second trial? Because it's not easy, obviously, testifying about any of this, but you have to imagine, to see multiple women already testifying, him already being convicted, it may embolden other people to come forward and make them a little bit more comfortable and have the strength to come forward if, in fact, he did sexually assault other women.
I think given the severity of the crimes, it's difficult to argue that it's not in the public interest to prosecute him. And where you've got a number of different class, a number of different victims coming forward and saying, look, I was also raped by this man, I was also sexually assaulted by him. It's going to be very difficult for prosecutors to say, well, he's already serving a lengthy prison sentence, we won't try him again. And one would hope in such circumstances, depending on the sentence he receives in June, you would hope in such circumstances that he would take a sensible view and make arrangements with the prosecution to come to some kind of deal whereby those victims didn't have to come to court and be put through the cross-examination that the victims in the first trial were subjected to. Not that I'm making any criticism, obviously, of the legal professionals involved, because they're duty bound to put their client's case.
Well, would that endanger his rights to an appeal? I mean, what are the appellate rights in the UK?
Well, he has a right to lodge an appeal against his conviction on the grounds that that conviction is unsafe. Ordinarily, in cases of this nature, given the potential impact upon the defendant's life, then a convicted defendant will, exercise his right of appeal. But the Court of Appeal will look at that. There's not a retrial. They would look at the trial process and establish whether or not really the test is the convictions are unsafe in all the circumstances. And so even if there are procedural irregularities in a trial, that doesn't necessarily mean that the convictions would be quashed, but rather the court would look at all the circumstances, including the strength of the evidence, before determining whether or not those convictions were unsafe. One can only imagine that he would face an uphill struggle in seeking to persuade the Court of Appeal that these convictions are unsafe, given how many there are of them.
By the way, just a legal point of view, how many tiers of appeal are there? Is there an intermediate court? Is there the highest court? How does it work? Just curious.
Well, there is. Virtually all serious cases are tried in what we call over here the Crown Court, so that is in front of a jury. Your right of appeal from the Crown Court is to what's called the Court of Appeal, Criminal Division. We do have a Supreme Court, so we have a court that hears cases of public importance, but very, very few criminal cases go to the Supreme Court. In fact, there are two recent examples, although they're not relevant to this, to this kind of case. But usually, the Court of Appeal is the last port of call, unless there's a point of public importance.
Interesting. Nick Brett, listen, thank you so much for coming on, giving us insight into the law and the circumstances about what's happening across the pond. I mean, really, really disturbing case, and we will see what his sentence will be and whether or not more people will come forward. But thank you so much for taking the time, sir. It's good to see you.
Thanks, Jesse. My pleasure.
And that's all we have for you right now here on Sidebar. Everybody, thank you so much for joining us. And as always, please subscribe on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you should get your podcasts. I'm Jesse Weber. I'll speak to you next time.